Yo guys, what is up? Max in our Borderlands 4 video, and today we've got our updated tier list. Now, I posted a tier list at around 150 hours played in Borderlands 4. I now have almost 500 hours played, so I've gotten to play a lot more of the characters. I've got to play a lot more of their builds, and I'm coming back with basically an updated tier list. However, for this tier list video this time around, we're going to be including leveling and endgame, because I've now pushed all of the characters to like UVH 5. So we're going to be doing like a leveling tier list first, talking about characters like 1 to 50 with basically 0 gear. And then the endgame is going to be like UVH 5 with ideal gear. How would I rank up the characters? And then probably at the very end, we'll do like a cumulative, how do all of the characters stack up across all of their different trees. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Once again, these kind of things are just my opinions and my experience on the characters. Your experience might differ. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I hope you find it informative. Let's do this. So we're going to start with a leveling tier list. This is leveling from level 1 to 50. Characters that are ranked higher are going to have faster clear speeds for both mobbing and bossing. They're going to be better with the least amount of gear possible, as in not having to find specific elements or specific pieces of gear. And we're also going to be keeping in mind like power spikes for the characters. How long does that skill tree take to come online? And also taking into consideration like how fast do they potentially farm drill sites, or how fast can they efficiently clear vile bounties for important leveling activities once they're done with the story. So we're starting out with Vex, and we've got Vex Blue Tree. I think Vex Blue Tree personally is S tier. I remember making a level 30 Vex and really struggling in UVH1 with a lot of characters with 0 gear. I put on the Spectres and they were immediately killing vile enemies. But the Spectre Vex is just good for leveling because, one, it doesn't really require much gear. The Spectres and the like Reapers do a bunch of damage. And one of the huge advantages that Vex has for leveling is while you're moving through areas, you can put the Spectres down and have them clear things while you're going from area to area. Let's say you need to move across the map. You're driving through a village. Just put your Spectres down in the village. They will kill everything there for you as long as you're spec'd into some sustainment so that they can get their health back on kill. And it makes it for a really, really enjoyable leveling experience. They're good at killing vile enemies. You don't need gear. They're strong throughout. And while I do think they fall off later into the endgame and the UVH tiers, this isn't a UVH tier list. And so that's why we've got Vex Blue in S tier. Next, we've got Vex Red Tree, aka Trouble. I think that is C tier at best. Trouble is just in a bad state even after its buffs. It needs better AI. It needs better damage uptime. One big issue with Trouble is how much it moves to enemies, where even if Trouble does decent damage, it's constantly chasing after things. And even when it's chasing after things, sometimes it'll miss. I just don't think it's that great of an action skill, and I don't think it's that great of a tree. And I don't think it has like any like really huge power spikes that you can super rely on. So just not personally a big fan of Trouble Vex. Next, we've got Green Tree Vex, where I'm going to be putting her at the bottom of A tier. By the way, we are going to be going like left to right in terms of like best to weakest among their tiers. But Green Tree Vex is a very cool skill tree. It is definitely a bit more gear reliant. You're going to be using Jacob's weapons a lot, which you need to find something to deal with vile enemies when you're going to be going through vile bounties. However, at like the start of the game, you can pick up early sustain. Bleed at like level 6, 7 to 10 is huge. You do need to crit enemies in order for a crit to be working, but she synergizes really well with Jacob's weapons. Jacob's weapons are some of the strongest early weapons in the game. You can get a ton of damage on her. You can pick up sustain, and I think she's very good. She's a bit more gear reliant than like Blue Tree Vex, which is why we're going to put her in A, but she starts a bit slower. But she gets like a ton of damage later on, a ton of sustain. And once you get some gear on her and using some solid Jacobs, I think Bleed Vex is a very, very solid time. I say Bleed Vex because you're in Green Tree, in my opinion, for Bleed. That's one of her strongest skills, regardless of crit knife. I'm not talking about any crit knife or bugged interactions. I just think Bleed on its own is very, very powerful. It's a ton of single target damage, and it'll help you kill a lot of bosses when you want to farm through the campaign. Next up, we've got Rafa, starting with his Apophis Lance. I'm going to put Apophis Lance into B tier. I think Apophis Lance as a action skill early on feels not good at all. It's kind of feels like a single use thing that if you don't hit an enemy or if you don't use it on multiple enemies, it feels like you're completely wasting it. A lot of your nodes early on are not super impactful. The node for like the bonus gun damage or increased gun damage from the first shot in your mag doesn't work for anything that isn't like a single shot. However, once you get into the second tier of trees and you start picking up gun crit chance and tons of gun damage, and then you can get bonuses of all your overdrives. Once you get to that like second tier of blue tree on Apophis Lance, then things start to come online. I don't think Apophis Lance itself is great, but the blue tree is very, very good, and it gives you a ton of life. One thing that blue tree has as a big advantage is you can basically pick up any gun and use it. Literally, like, it's one of the most versatile skill trees in terms of what gun you use. So I think B tier is a solid place for it. Next, we get Red Tree Rafa, Peacebreaker Cannons. I think Red Tree Rafa is just disgusting. This is one of the best trees in the game, in endgame, in early game. Peacebreaker Cannons, at a very early level, you can have a ton of sustain and uptime. They will kill enemies for you. You can pick up anything and just go along with your Peacebreaker Cannons. Later on, you can pick up some really strong skills to pair with the Peacebreaker Cannons. You've got splash damage bonuses if you want to go splash route. You've got the like ricochets and indirect projectiles for like your Peacebreaker Cannons, getting sustained from your Peacebreaker Cannons. Beam Team, not the greatest later on, really solid early for leveling because it does shock and corrosive, and most of the enemies you're fighting are going to be order enemies. I just think that this tree, wherever you take it, is really, really solid, and the Peacebreaker Cannons are arguably one of the best action skills in the entire game, and you can get some gear to like turn into AFK Rafa and just like not have to shoot your gun for your whole playthrough. He's just really, really solid all around and not gear reliant, which is awesome. And then we get Green Tree Rafa, who we're going to be putting in C tier. I think Arc Knives are actually pretty solid early on. They do good damage. You can kill things. However, Green Tree Rafa's survivability is really not good. You need very specific gear and things to like actually start feeling like you can survive on this. I remember just trying to bash my face into badasses and getting wrecked on Green Tree Rafa. Plus, there's so many bosses that like Arc Knives just don't work into, and I just think you're going to have a rougher time. Like you're at a disadvantage in this game currently if you're rocking melee. Next, we get to Harlowe. Harlowe has a 0 point in her blue tree. This is honestly pretty solid for mobbing once you get some augments for it, but early on, it feels terrible. You've got this like weird thing with blue tree Harlowe with 0 point, where like you want to be slamming the enemies and shooting them, but if you kill the enemy that you grab, you have to wait like 35 seconds just to be able to attack another enemy. It's one of the worst feeling action skills in the game early on because it just doesn't really do anything unless if you kill the enemy in the bubble, you grab an enemy that's low HP, your action skill sucks. However, later on, for clearing, it's actually very nice. You can pick up like Inertia on Blue Tree Harlowe and get decent clear speed. As long as you've got a gun that you can use to kill the enemies in the bubble, Inertia really helps for clear speed. And then you can do some things for like killing out larger groups of enemies once you get like the cryo slams and cold storage. However, it is absolutely useless against bosses. It is useless against vile enemies. And for that reason, we're going to be putting Blue Tree in C tier. Then we've got Red Tree Harlowe. I think Red Tree Harlowe is... I'm not quite sure where to put her in S tier, but she's absolutely S tier. Neutron Capture Harlowe is one of the strongest level 6s in the game. Now, because the buff is quite short, you do need to have decent aim, but you shred everything. And then as soon as you pick up Demon Core with Neutron Capture, the game is just an absolute cakewalk. You do need to pick up some cooldowns so that you can use Neutron Capture more often. But truly, like, one of the strongest characters in the game for early. You can use a white weapon and you'd still kill bosses on Green Tree Harlowe. She's one of the least gear dependents. The big thing is just once you get cooldown, you basically win the game. Her, like, prior to getting Demon Core can be a little tricky. If you like miss a Neutron Capture, all of your damage is gone for quite a while. So her damage uptime is very, very bursty. However, just one of the easiest levelers in my opinion. Green Tree Harlowe, we're going to be putting in A tier. Green Tree Harlowe is awkward early on. You need to get to a certain point. Basically being getting Excited State and picking up Nuclear Winter. But once you pick up Excited State and Nuclear Winter, you have infinite crit. Like level 15, level 16. It just gets ridiculous. So her like mid game to late game for leveling, like past level 16, is ridiculously strong. However, her like 1 to 16 leveling is quite awkward. It's quite weird. However, because her strength is so good later on, we just have to place her in A tier. Plus, you can pick up Halo once you get your first capstone, which is easily one of the best capstones in the entire game. Next, we get to talk about Amon. Amon's blue tree is really good for leveling, actually. I think it's fantastic. However, where it really starts to shine is once you get to Primal Surge, which isn't till a bit later. But if you get Primal Surge, you can start using Ordnance Amon, who I think is just one of the comfiest, strongest levelers in the game. You can pick up basically any purple ordnance and have infinite ammo with it. You can get Overshield. You get tanky. You're great at killing vile enemies. Your damage is crazy. Single target, bossing, mobbing. The only reason I'm not putting Blue Amon for ordnance leveling into S tier is simply because it takes a while to start to get that online. Basically, you need Primal Surge or finding a Cyborg class mod to drop so that you get points into like Endless Bombardment or Primal Surge prior to that. So a little bit gear specific, but once you get those points, Blue Tree Amon's great, and the whip is honestly a lot better now after the buffs. So all around pretty solid. Then we get to Red Tree Amon. Red Tree Amon is a massive pain to level, in my opinion, basically until you pick up Berserk. Once you pick up Berserk, you get stacking bonus cryo damage, and then the game becomes a whole lot easier. However, up until that point, I think Onslaught is one of the most awkward action skills in the game to use, and there's just not a lot going for Red Tree Amon until you get to that point. However, once you get Berserk, once you get like Dragon's Breath, Electrical Fire, all these nodes that are later on in the tree are really strong. However, just like that leveling prior to that is probably some of the worst in the game. So that's why he's in C tier. And then lastly, Green Amon. I'm going to put Green Amon in B tier. Green Amon, maybe a little bit higher than Apophis Lance. Green Amon is really good with his axes. I think Green Amon is actually one of the strongest, like level 1 to 16s in the game, to be honest. You get good action skill spam with the axes. You can pick up, I'm blanking on the skill, that gives you 30% bonus shock damage at like a T2 skill early on. You pair that with like any Jacob shotgun, and you're just going to start cruising through enemies. However, the fall off on Green Tree Amon is crazy because once you get Freezy axes, there really isn't anything else good to get in like Green Tree. In fact, my Green Tree leveling build goes basically all the way down to Green Tree and then does a full respec basically out of Green Tree into Red Tree so that you can pick up Freezy axes plus Berserk. Green Tree is great early on. However, it falls off and you just end up having to put your points elsewhere because there really isn't much going on for the later parts of Green Tree. So early power spike, but falls off quickly. So that is our tier list for leveling 1 to 50. All right, now let's go over our endgame tier list. Now, endgame is a bit trickier to rank because a lot of endgame builds don't put all of their points into one tree, and a lot of builds are going to be using a tree for ridiculously strong passives without using their action skill. And so basically the way that we've tried to do this, because originally I was going to do it by builds and I was going to try to do like a build tier list. And if you guys would like to see that, let me know. But for this video, we're going to be doing the trees and we're going to be taking into consideration both the action skill and the passives of the tree. So a tree that has a really good action skill and really good passives are going to be ranked higher than a tree that has a terrible action skill and really good passives. If we're looking at the trees, like, I would be focusing on if you're playing it, how it's meant to be played or how it's like built to be played. So for example, I spec a lot of my builds on Harlowe into her blue tree. However, I would genuinely never use 0 point. So while 0 point is bad, her blue tree is good. So that would be definitely lower on the tier list, even though there are good passives in that particular tree. All right. with that, let's do this. All right, starting off, we've got Blue Vex. Blue Tree Vex is pretty nice for endgame. You've got a bunch of different options. You've got like Prismatic Ichor for status effect and dot builds. You've got your Spectres, which you can use for gun builds and status effect builds. You've got the Reapers with Reverberations for Groundbreaker stacking for one-shotting bosses with melee. There's just a lot going on in this tree with different viable builds, which I personally love. And the action skill is good. Like both the action skills and these skills are good. I don't think it's her best skill tree at all. I don't think it's her best action skill. However, it's pretty solid and it's got good build diversity. And so for that, we're going to be putting Vex Blue into a tree. Next, we've got Vex Red tree. It is what it is. The treble buffs are just not nearly enough. Treble needs love. And I do think that Vex Red tree has some really good passives, but a lot of those really good passives are at the T1 tier. Really, really rarely do you need to spec past T1 on Red Tree Vex. And so for that, I'm not going to rate the tree very highly. Like there are like, you know, the bonus kinetic damage or upkeeping your action skill in T1, but everything past that's like almost worse. And so action skill's not good. Deep passives aren't good. And for that reason, I don't rate Red Tree Vex very highly. And then we get to Green Tree Vex. Green Tree Vex is S tier. So many things are great in Green Tree. And when I originally put Green Tree Vex in S tier, people are like, well, but her action skill's bad. It's like, yeah, Incarnate's not doing a ton of damage, but you get Witchy Trigger Finger and you get infinite sticky stacking. You get infinite ordnance. Who cares if it doesn't do that much damage if it's so build enabling? You can stack tons of stickies with her action skill, which is one of the highest damage options in the game. Plus, you can use ordnance with it. And she's got some of the strongest passives in the game where you can get +3 of all of her kill skills. You can proc kill skills on crits. You get like 100+ bonus kinetic damage. You get damage scaling off of your health. There just really isn't any reason to not spec into Green Tree for like crazy gun damage, crit damage, bleed. It's so good. And even though Incarnate itself is not dealing a ton of damage, the utility it provides is pretty crazy, from more upkeep while your action skill is up to just infinite ammo without having to really spec anything for infinite ammo. So that is why we're going to put Green Tree Vex into S tier. Next, we get Blue Tree Harlowe. Blue Tree Harlowe, we're going to be putting into C tier. As I kind of mentioned, 0 point is butt. I don't like it. I really think it needs some major changes, not only to like some numerical buffs, but I think they just need to change the way that the 0 point action skill functions inherently. 0 point has a augment called Inertia that when you kill an enemy, another enemy is grasped. I think that just needs to be inherently built into the skill, because it feels like Blue Tree 0 point is almost there, but you need either to be able to use 2 capstones or to be able to use 2 augments, because it's got like these pieces that if you could put them all together, it'd be really strong, but you can't because you're limited by the amount of capstones and augments. So I really think they need to like maybe work in some of her augments just to like as a base for how 0 point functions. Make it a duration-based action skill. Make it so that when you kill enemies, it regrasps enemies by default, and then you could spec all those cool things about how you want to slam them, or if you want to make cryo explosions, or if you want to be able to grab multiple and slam multiple at the same time. I just think it needs a rework. However, Blue Tree passives are really good. Action skill, crit, fire rate. You got entanglement, transfer, lots of good things, big bonus cryo damage. However, her action skill is just really bad. And so for that, I'm going to be putting her into C tier. Next, we've got Red Tree Harlowe. Red Tree Harlowe, in my opinion, is in S tier. Now, I've made 2 big like Red Tree builds, both like Neutron Capture, which we've talked about, is really strong. It is easily one of her strongest builds and easily one of the strongest builds in the game with the amount of single target that you get out of Neutron Capture. However, now that we're in endgame, you get to spam your action skill with like a Skeptic class mod. Plus, Red Tree is really good for status effect builds. I made a Half-Life Harlowe build that is putting like 400,000 plus dot ticks of radiation on enemies. So like even if you're not using Neutron Capture, this skill tree is really good for status effects, getting more status effect chance, duration, damage, bonus rad damage against enemies entangled. It's really, really good. And I think the only real weakness of Red Tree, in my opinion, is that it lacks a bit of survivability. But once we're in endgame, we can solve that with things like a kill spring. So you can like minimize some of those weaknesses. And then we get Green Tree Harlowe. Now, this is a tough one. I get asked this a ton of which one do I think is better, Green Tree Harlowe or Red Tree Harlowe. And I think Red Tree Harlowe, as I ranked it for leveling, is the better skill. And until you get like specific weapons with specific Jacob's rolls and specific enhancements, I think Red Tree Harlowe is just better than Green Tree. However, at endgame, if I was to put on the best gear that I have possible, I personally would take Green Tree Harlowe or Red Tree. Infinicrit Harlowe with Excited State, with Nuclear Winter, with all of the survivability, all of the shield amp, constantly amping all of your shots, the survivability, the fire rate stacking, the gun damage of Halo. It just has like everything that you could want. And you can go full Green Tree, all of your points, and all of a sudden you get infinite ammo, or you could put some points into Blue Tree and you have infinite Halo. I just think Green Tree's action skills, its passives, everything in there are so good, and I think it is easily deserving of S tier. Next, we get Blue Tree Rafa or Apophis Lance Rafa. I'm going to be putting Apophis Lance Rafa into A tier. Now, next we get Blue Tree Rafa, which I have like a tough time. I think it's like A+ tier or like S- tier. Blue Tree Rafa is just like teetering on the edge. Blue Tree's skills and passives are insane. You can get, your action skill dealing double damage or hitting multiple times. You can get like off or infinite crit. You can get tons of crit chance, gun damage, ammo regen, some of the highest fire rate, if not the highest fire rate in the game from Blue Tree. It's a really, really good passives. However, I just don't like the Apophis Lance action skill. It just feels bad to use. Or the Raiju or Raijin, you have to be like up close and really, really personal to enemies. I think Blue Tree Rafa personally feels better with Peacebreaker cannons than Apophis Lance, hence the like Ranger Rafa build, which is currently my favorite Rafa build to play. And that specs mainly into Blue Tree. So the passives are really good on Blue Tree Rafa, but I think Apophis Lance just feels a bit awkward and clunky to use, particularly by the fact that the best class mod in the game for Rafa is the Dancer, and using Apophis Lance while it's active, like you can't use your ordnance at all. You're stuck in that. And personally, I just don't like the Apophis Lance, but it's undeniable how powerful like the passives in Blue Tree Rafa are. So we're going to be putting it in A tier. Could very easily be argued for S. And then we get Red Tree Rafa. I think Red Tree Rafa is definitely S tier. There's so many different ways to build and play Red Tree Rafa, whether you're going like the Ricochet Rafa route on the left side, you can go Meteor Chucks, you can do Fire Pot Grenades with the like indirect damage. There's a bunch of different ways to play the left side. Then you get the right side, which has like 175% splash damage increases, plus Tamario gives you ridiculous amounts of gun damage, and you get Soltado to double all of your like overdrive bonuses. Red Tree is crazy. Peacebreaker cannons are nuts. You can go AFK Rafa and beat the entire game without ever having to shoot your guns. I just think Red Tree is just so ridiculously strong. The one thing that it is lacking a bit of is survivability. Your only real like survivability nodes are the like movement speed health regen, which is solid. You can get like 10% health regen per second, which is pretty good. And the lifesteal from your indirect projectiles is decent, but it's definitely not like the best healing up here. I would definitely give that to like Green Vex or Green Harlowe. And next we get Green Tree Rafa. Now I'm going to be putting Green Tree Rafa into B tier. And I'm saying this is someone who's one-shot most of the bosses in the game with like arc knives. Arc knives is like... The thing with melee in this game is it's just putting you at a disadvantage. There are enemies that one-shot you regardless of your build because they're suicide psychos. And like if you're playing melee, you just dash into these enemies all the time. It is hard to stay alive on Green Tree Arc Knives in late game with the amount of just like BS modifiers that you encounter. Enemies can only get damaged by headshots. Good luck. in your like arc knives. You have to deal with those psycho enemies that are constantly explode and flying enemies, which the arc knives are really horrible at targeting. I don't know what's wrong with arc knives, but it just feels terrible to like target anything that's like 2 inches off of the ground. However, the damage on arc knives is very nice. You can infinite groundbreaker stack on them. You can go a ordnance build with like grenades and infinite grenade spam on green tree, which is pretty good. So there is some versatility there. I just don't think it's quite on the tier of like a blue Rafa or even red Rafa. Definitely his weakest tree, but not like the weakest tree in the game. Hence why we put it in B. Next we get to Amon, and I'm just going to preface this by saying that Amon is pretty hard to rank, to be honest, because, for example, Onslaught, his red action skill is pretty terrible. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good action skill. However, in red tree, you have Berserk, which is hands down one of the strongest skills in the game. You also have Dragon's Breath. You have detonations. You have electrical fire. So there's a lot of really good things in red tree. However, the action skill holds it down so much, in my opinion. And then you've also got like blue tree, which can go ordnance. But in blue tree, you're most likely speccing into Berserk, and green tree, you can go like shotguns and Jacob's like one-shot build, but you're also going to be speccing into red tree for Berserk. So like, I still think Amon needs some like massive love to his trees. Like most of his capstones suck, and playing him as a action skill dealer still feels pretty bad to me. However, if you spec around into multiple of his trees, you can get some real big damage. So with that, let's start ranking him. I'm going to be putting blue Amon into A tier. I probably put him there mainly because of Ordnance. Ordnance Amon is just really good. You get tons of damage. You can pick up any purple and do disgusting damage with it. Your survivability with all of the like overshield leech is good. You can now on like updated Stormbringer Amon, you get all of your like ordnance shots to get amped. I don't think Amon, well, he's definitely the most comfortable ordnance dealer. You basically have infinite ammo. Tail of the Comet is crazy for dot damage. Plus, Blackout is not fixed yet. Blackout, once you get electrical dots, plus those cryo dots from a big rocket launcher, you can one-shot most bosses in the game on Ordnance Amon, and you can do it while being tanky. Still think the skill tree needs some love because the capstones all feel like butt cheeks, but blue tree Amon, very, very good. And then we get to red tree Amon, where I'm probably going to do something that people aren't going to like here and put red tree Amon also in A tier. I think red tree Amon, if you're playing it as a onslaught melee build, feels pretty terrible. However, it's like undeniable that Berserk is one of the strongest skills or passives in the game. It infinitely stacks Groundbreaker. You can one-shot like tons of bosses with Groundbreaker, Berserk stacking, plus electrical fire for dot builds is huge. Wildfire Amon as a detonate status effect build is crazy, and detonations in the red tree basically allow you to take anything that's the strongest damage attack that you can do in the game. Like if you do a spread launcher and then detonate it, you're hitting, I was hitting 60 million explosions without like much setup on detonation Amon. If you want to push that with a Groundbreaker, you can start doing like 200 million damage for like a detonation Amon setup. So the damage is there, but playing in a way that like is probably not like the way that the tree is really built for, which is melee. Melee red tree, I would rate probably like into B, lower than Rafa. However, as a status effect detonation build, A is actually, or red tree is pretty good. And then we get to green tree. I hate green tree Amon. It's so bad. Your damage basically falls off after Freezy Axes. There's really no reason to go past that for the most part. I think Minion Green Tree Amon is worse than Treble Vex, to be honest. I spent a bunch of time speccing into a full like axe build. I'd probably put it above Treble, but I put all of my points with the best class mods I could find into the Minion drones, and I watched 3 of them fight a single trash mob that had the regenerator modifier on it for about a minute. These axes could not kill a single enemy with the regen modifier on UVH5 with like 10 out of 5 points into their damage. It was ridiculous. The thing with the axes is they run over to go hit an enemy, and then that enemy moves a step while they're doing their swinging animation, and then they miss, and then they run back over to go swing, and then they miss. Like, they just need an AI overhaul. They need way more attack range. Even if they were attacking and never missing, they still hit for like 4K damage. They just feel terrible. And I think it's easily one of the weakest trees in the game, to be honest. It's funny because I originally rated Green Tree Amon highly because I was using a Hot Slugger, and like the Hot Slugger is good on Amon, but it's like better on everyone else. So like, Amon does have some interesting things for like using like a Jacob shotgun in that tree, but as like an intended minion drone build, I do think it's one of the weakest trees in the game. Now let's talk about cumulative power. Basically, I took their trees, how we ranked them, and then assigned a number to each. So like, for example, if Rafa was the number 1 in S tier, that would be 12 points, and then Blue Vex would be 11 points, and then we put those all in a data sheet to get kind of our like cumulative ranking. This is not how strong or like what build is the strongest, it's how do all of their trees kind of match up. So this was how I kind of ranked them on launch, with Vex being slightly higher than Harlowe, who is 2nd place, Rafa being 3rd, and then Amon being 4th for Endgame. And now if we take a look, these were their points, like pretty close, and then Amon at 15. Now how I like rank them is currently it looks like we've got Rafa winning, with both Red Tree and Blue Tree being super solid, Green Tree not being like the worst in the game. So Rafa gets a lot of points for 2 really, really strong trees. Harlowe is just behind. I think Green Tree Rafa is stronger than Blue Tree Harlowe. So that's really the only reason that Rafa is ahead here over Harlowe, is I would take Green Tree Rafa over Blue Tree Harlowe. And then Vex is just behind both of those. I think Green Tree Vex, as you saw in the tier list, is probably the strongest skill tree in the entire game. However, I think her Blue Tree and her Red Tree fall significantly behind comparatively to the Green Tree. Her build diversity isn't quite as strong, in my opinion. Then I actually rated Amon worse than I did on launch, even after the buffs. He did somehow lose a point there. I still think Amon is significantly behind the rest of the pack. That's not to say that Amon doesn't have strong builds. I posted tons of strong builds for him. However, I think he's just lacking some of the like crazy power in his single trees. As you've seen with my build guides, almost all of them spec very heavy into 2 different trees, and almost never do I actually go deep enough to get capstones, just because I think his power is a whole lot more spread out. It's not as concentrated. His capstones are pretty bad, and his damage is a little bit more spread out than some of the other characters. So that's not to say that he doesn't have strong builds. Just I don't think his power is as concentrated in his skill trees as some of the other characters. I would feel a whole lot better putting 49 points into Red Tree Rafa or Green Tree Vex or Green Tree Harlowe or Red Tree Harlowe than I would putting 49 points into Green Tree or 49 points into Red or 49 points into Blue. So just my opinions there. And then we get the leveling experience, which I'm kind of shocked by, actually. It looks like all of the characters got 19 points for leveling. Once again, I didn't like plan this. It's just how the math worked out for their numbers, which I think is pretty funny. And then Harlowe with the best leveling. I think Harlowe Green Tree and Harlowe Red Tree are both pretty great for leveling. I rate them very highly, where the other characters all have a solid leveling option. I think you have a solid leveling option on all of the characters. So yeah, can't really go wrong with leveling. I do think Harlowe has a little bit more options, but in terms of leveling, you know, Red Tree Rafa, Blue Tree Vex, Red Tree Harlowe, and Blue Tree Amon are some of my favorites. And so that is our leveling tree. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, these are just my opinions and my personal experience from playing the characters. My opinion is not any more right than anyone else's. This is just how I personally feel about the characters. If you feel differently, that's totally fine. We can have a conversation in the comments. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it informative and helpful. And I hope Gearbox takes a look at this and kind of sees that, honestly, even after the buffs, Amon still, in my opinion, still needs some serious love. So guys, with that, I'll catch y'all in the next one. Take care. Peace.